What would you do if you knew that you had 1 week to live? And what if this week was it? What would you do? In your last days, would you take a trip? Um, would you go away, do something on your bucket list that you have always wanted to do and never gotten the opportunity to do? If this was your last week, would you go away or take a trip, or would you go home? Would you go see family? If this was your last week, would you do some last minute sinning or some last minute repenting? If this was your last week, would you be sad, or would you be angry? Would you be hopeful or afraid? How do you think you would spend those final hours of your last days? What would you do? With those questions in mind, I want to read to you something that Jesus, it happened in his life in John chapter 13. It says, Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. He knew his time was up. He knew that his time on earth was coming to an end. And then it goes on to say, having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. That's John chapter 13, verse 1. So after reading that verse 1 of chapter 13, you can look through the other chapters that are following. And when Jesus had 1 week to live, he chose to wash the disciples' feet. He did the work of a common slave. He ministered to those who were closest to him. He washed their dirty feet. And then in John chapter 14, it began to set in that he was going to be going away. And in that chapter, Jesus comforted those, his followers. And then in chapters 15 and 16, he encouraged them. In John chapter 17, he prayed for them. And then after he prayed for them, the scripture says he died for them. So the last week of Jesus' life, he was fulfilling his purpose. He spent that last week of his life being a servant. In Matthew chapter 20, a passage I'm sure you have heard, it says, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. So Jesus came, and he knew his time was coming to an end. He fulfilled his purpose. So let me ask you a question. What if this was our last week? What if all we had left was the rest of this week? This is Thursday. What if tomorrow and Saturday would come and our life was over on Sunday? What would we do? Well, here's what a challenge I want to give you is, let's spend whatever time we have. We may have months, we may have years, but let's spend whatever time we have left fulfilling God's purpose. Let's do that which is most important in terms of eternity. And when you think about eternity, serving Christ, and as we serve Christ, we're going to be serving others. So let's serve Jesus by living for him, the one who died for us. Not only did he die, he arose again. So let's serve Jesus. He has forgiven us. He's redeemed us. We've been adopted into God's family. We've been redeemed. So let's serve Jesus by living for him. But also let's serve others by sharing the greatest news. And that greatest news that I know for me is the difference that Jesus has made. There's definitely a before Christ and after Christ in my life. You can see that time, that difference. So let's serve Jesus by living for him. And let's share the greatest news, the difference that he has made in our lives. And let's do that until our life is over. I just want to thank you for joining me.